At the dawn of the nuclear era, the United States had hoped to maintain the monopoly over nuclear technology and nuclear weapons. However, 4 years after the explosion of the nuclear bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Soviet Union tested its first nuclear device, unleashing the nuclear arms race. During the 1950s, the United States expanded its nuclear weapons programs, seeking to compensate its alleged conventional weapons inferiority in Europe by relying on the doctrine of massive retaliation. Nuclear deterrence therefore came to shape the defense posture of the superpowers, and MAD, mutual assured destruction, became a defining feature of the Cold War. The arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union induced other major powers to seek their own independent nuclear deterrent, thus leading to an initial, limited proliferation of nuclear weapons. The United Kingdom, 1952, France, 1960, and the People's Republic of China, 1964, in fact tested their own nuclear devices, and nuclear weapons became a seemingly permanent element of the international system. Following the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, when the superpowers had come dangerously close to a nuclear exchange, Washington and Moscow started to engage in the first arms control negotiations in order to reduce the future possibility of nuclear war. This gradual reduction of tension between the superpowers led to the successful conclusion of the Multilateral Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, 1968, and the beginning of Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT, between the United States and the Soviet Union. At the time of the negotiations on the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, nuclear proliferation threatened to further destabilize the international system, as analysts predicted that 20 to 25 states would acquire nuclear weapons within 20 years. The impetus behind the NPT was, in fact, the need to prevent a world with many nuclear weapon states. The Cold War nuclear deterrent between the US and USSR was dangerous but stable. Having more nuclear weapon states would multiply the risks of miscalculation, accidents, unauthorized use of weapons, and increase chances of escalation from conventional to nuclear war in case of conflict. Freezing the situation as it was in the late 1960s, the negotiations were in essence based on a bargain between the non-nuclear weapon states that agreed never to acquire nuclear weapons, and the 5 nuclear weapon states that agreed in exchange to share the technology for the peaceful use of nuclear weapons and to pursue nuclear disarmament in order to ultimately eliminate their nuclear arsenals. The NPT was signed in July 1968 and entered into force in March 1970. From the initial 40 signatory states required for the treaty to become effective, 190 states are now party to the treaty. While it was initially meant for a limited duration of 25 years, the parties agreed to extend the treaty indefinitely at the Review Conference of 1995. Today, the vast majority of states are members of the NPT. However, 4 UN member states never joined the treaty: India, Pakistan, Israel, and South Sudan. That separated from Sudan only in 2011. North Korea acceded to the treaty in the 1980s, but announced its withdrawal in 2003. Of the non-party to the NPT states, 3 have tested nuclear weapons: India, 1974, Pakistan, 1998, and North Korea, 2006. Israel, instead, has maintained a policy of so-called nuclear ambiguity, neither confirming nor denying the possession of nuclear weapons, but is widely believed to possess nuclear weapons. In parallel with the multilateral negotiations that led to the signing of the NPT, the United States and the Soviet Union started bilateral talks to limit the size of their nuclear arsenals. The Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT, started in the late 1960s and led to the signing of 2 landmark treaties in 1972 and 1979. Although the SALT I and SALT II treaties codified a persistently high level of nuclear weapons, they initiated an arms control process that was, despite setbacks, never interrupted. The SALT treaties in essence set the basis for the nuclear arms reduction talks, START. The agreements reached between the US and Russia in the post-Cold War era. Both the NPT and the US-Soviet/Russian agreements had and continue to have many problematic features. Critics of the NPT underline the importance of the international community in preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the states not party to the treaty, as well as the difficulty in monitoring the exclusively peaceful nature of nuclear programs, with the Iranian case, in this context, being exemplary. Furthermore, the non-nuclear weapons states have charged that while their side of the bargain has been respected, in essence condoning a world with the haves and the haves not, the nuclear weapons states have not maintained their treaty commitments in all aspects related to nuclear disarmament, almost 50 years from the signing of the treaty. In fact, it is still difficult to imagine a world without nuclear weapons. The national security strategies of the nuclear weapon states still openly rely on nuclear weapons as a crucial element of their defense. The US-Russian agreements are instead criticized for allowing the former superpowers to maintain an excessive number of nuclear weapons. Despite the drastic reduction in the size of their nuclear arsenals, now at less than 1/5 compared to the height of the arms race in the 1960s, the United States and Russia still possess more than enough strategic warheads to deter a nuclear attack, and they are both still updating and modernizing their delivery systems. Should these weapons be used even in a limited way, the result would be catastrophic. Notwithstanding the many problematic aspects of the NPT and the thousands of nuclear weapons still present in the stockpiles of the United States and Russia, these agreements continue to define the international system today. The NPT remains the only treaty that regulates nuclear proliferation, while the bilateral US-Russian treaties provide for verification mechanisms that maintain the level of weapons under control and prevent both sides from developing more weapons in the future. In this episode, we looked at how nuclear weapons and arms control defined the Cold War's most dangerous moments. But while superpowers avoided direct conflict, the Cold War was fought elsewhere. In Part 3, we'll examine the proxy wars and interventions from Vietnam to Afghanistan, and how those conflicts continue to shape global instability today. Subscribe and watch the full series in our playlist to keep going with understanding the Cold War, then and now.